Hello everyone, and welcome back to Rewilding the Future. Today, we'll explore one of the most fascinating and unexpected ideas in modern conservation, rewilding hippos in India and Asia. Yes, you heard that right, hippos, not just in Africa, but possibly returning to the rivers of the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, the Mekong, and beyond. This episode will be a deep journey into prehistory, ecology, and the imagination of what our future landscapes could look like if we brought back one of the most powerful ecosystem engineers the world has ever known. This will be a long and detailed video because the story of the hippo in Asia is vast. It stretches across millions of years of evolution, extinction, and the possibility of renewal. We'll talk about the ancient history of Asian hippos, their ecological importance, where they could be rewilded today, how they might interact with other wildlife, and what challenges and opportunities lie ahead if we ever decide to bring them back. So, sit back, grab a drink, and imagine this. The sun rising over the Brahmaputra floodplain, mist over the water, egrets flying low, and a sound that hasn't been heard here for 10,000 years, the deep, echoing roar of a hippo. Let's begin.
The hippopotamus, Hippopotamus amphibius, is native to Africa today, but its evolutionary history reaches deep into Asia. Fossil evidence shows that ancestors of modern hippos once ranged across large parts of the Old World, including India, Pakistan, and Southeast Asia. Hippos belong to the family Hippopotamidae, which evolved from early semi-aquatic artiodactyls around 15 to 20 million years ago. The earliest members of this family, such as Kenyapotamus, appeared in East Africa, but by the Middle to Late Miocene, about 10 to 7 million years ago, related species had spread into Asia through ancient land bridges that connected Africa with the Indian subcontinent. During the Pliocene and Pleistocene epochs, 5 million to 12,000 years ago, India and parts of southern Asia were home to several species of hippos. Fossils from the Siwalik Hills of northern India, the Narmada Valley, and the Godavari Basin reveal that hippopotamuses thrived in ancient river systems that once flowed through what are now dry or seasonal landscapes. These prehistoric species, such as Hippopotamus paleindicus, were slightly different from today's African hippo, but filled a similar ecological niche. They were large, semi-aquatic herbivores that grazed on riverbank vegetation and submerged plants, forming a vital part of the megafaunal communities that also included elephants, rhinoceroses, and crocodiles. Asian hippos likely entered the subcontinent when climate and geography allowed lush wetlands and vast floodplains. India's tropical and subtropical climate provided ideal habitats, slow-moving rivers, oxbow lakes, and marshes similar to the Ganges or Godavari systems of today. Archaeological findings even suggest they coexisted with early humans, who may have hunted them or competed for water resources. As the last ice age ended roughly 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, India and much of Asia underwent major climatic drying. The great river systems that once sustained huge megafaunal populations shrank or shifted course, and many large herbivores, including the Indian hippopotamus, vanished. A combination of climate change, habitat loss, and human hunting pressure likely caused their extinction. By the Holocene, the hippopotamus had disappeared from Asia entirely, surviving only in sub-Saharan Africa. This extinction was part of the broader late Pleistocene megafaunal collapse, which saw the loss of giant elephants, rhinos, and large bovids across the subcontinent. The hippo's disappearance altered wetland ecosystems, as these animals had once played a key role in maintaining the balance between aquatic and terrestrial vegetation. Traces of ancient hippos appear not only in fossils, but also in mythology and art across early Indian civilizations. Some scholars believe that ancient depictions of large, semi-aquatic beasts in early Mesopotamian and South Asian art may have been inspired by hippos or their memory preserved through oral traditions. Fossilized remains found in river terraces and caves fascinated local populations, sometimes inspiring myths of river monsters or divine beasts of the water. In modern times, paleontologists studying Indian hippo fossils have used them to understand migration patterns between Africa and Asia, shedding light on how species adapted to different climates over millions of years. The Indian fossil record has revealed that the family Hippopotamidae was once more diverse and widespread than previously thought. Although hippos no longer live in Asia naturally, their distant relatives, the pygmy hippos, Choeropsis liberiensis, show what ancient Asian species might have looked like in forested wetland habitats. Modern conservationists have even speculated about rewilding or introducing hippos to parts of Asia where ecosystems could sustain them, such as India's large river systems or certain tropical wetlands, to restore lost ecological functions. However, such reintroductions would raise complex ethical and ecological questions, especially concerning water resources, agriculture, and human safety. The hippopotamus once roamed widely across India and southern Asia, thriving along vast prehistoric rivers for millions of years. Their extinction coincided with climate shifts and the arrival of early humans, marking the end of a long chapter in Asian natural history. Though now confined to Africa, the hippo's Asian legacy lives on in fossils, myths, and the landscapes that once echoed with their grunts and splashes. For millions of years, Asia's great river valleys like the Ganges, Brahmaputra, Godavari and Mekong were home to massive semi-aquatic herbivores that shaped their landscapes. Among them were ancient relatives of today's African hippopotamus. They grazed on riverbank vegetation, opened waterways for fish and birds, and fertilized floodplains with their nutrient-rich dung. Yet around 10,000 years ago, as the last ice age ended and human populations expanded, these mighty river giants vanished from India and across southern Asia. Their loss left behind ecosystems that, though still beautiful, became quieter and less dynamic. Today, with much of Asia facing degraded wetlands, collapsing fish populations, and shrinking biodiversity, the idea of rewilding hippos has begun to re-emerge. Not as fantasy, but as a vision of ecological repair, rooted in deep time. Hippos are ecosystem engineers, among the most influential mammals in the modern world. Their daily movement between land and water recycles massive amounts of nutrients, fueling life in rivers, floodplains and lakes. Each hippo produces over 50 kilograms of organic matter per day, feeding fish, aquatic insects and microscopic plankton. By grazing on tall grass and creating open mud channels, they maintain the balance between land and water ecosystems, something that modern Asian wetlands increasingly lack. In India, the disappearance of large aquatic herbivores has contributed to the stagnation of rivers, overgrowth of invasive plants, and loss of breeding sites for birds and fish. Hippos could restore the natural disturbance and renewal cycles that once defined ancient river systems like the Ganges or Brahmaputra. Moreover, reintroducing hippos would create a living link to India's prehistoric past, bringing back a species that coexisted with early humans and elephants. It would also diversify the continent's large animal guild, which today is dominated by land-based herbivores such as water buffalo, elephants and deer. In regions like the Sundarbans, Kaziranga or Cambodia's Tonle Sap, hippos could fill the ecological niche left vacant by extinct megafauna, restoring balance between grazers, predators and aquatic vegetation. In addition, their presence would help combat eutrophication, the over-enrichment of water bodies with nutrients from agricultural runoff, by stirring sediments and recycling nutrients naturally. If Asia were to rewild hippos, careful consideration would be needed about which kind to introduce. There are two main living species, the common hippopotamus and the pygmy hippopotamus. The common hippo, found across sub-Saharan Africa, would best replicate the ecological functions once performed by extinct Indian species like Hippopotamus pale-indicus. It thrives in large rivers, wetlands and floodplains, the very environments that still exist in parts of India, Nepal, Myanmar and Southeast Asia. However, reintroducing common hippos would require vast protected areas with deep water, abundant vegetation and minimal human conflict. Potential rewilding zones could include the Brahmaputra floodplains, the Ganges Delta and large protected wetlands such as Kaziranga National Park or the Chilika Lagoon, where space, biodiversity and water depth align. The pygmy hippo, smaller and more reclusive, might be a better candidate for Southeast Asia's forested wetlands, such as parts of Thailand, Malaysia or Indonesia. Its habits, living in dense forest swamps and feeding on undergrowth, could complement rewilding programs focused on restoring smaller wetland systems or secondary rainforest habitats. These pygmy hippos could function similarly to forest tapirs or swamp deer, enriching soil and maintaining the structure of aquatic vegetation. In both cases, rewilding must balance ecological benefits with social responsibility. Hippos are powerful animals, and coexistence with rural communities requires careful planning, fencing in agricultural zones, and community-based conservation models that ensure local people gain from tourism and restoration programs. Rewilding hippos would bring multiple ecological and climate benefits. Their feeding and movement patterns increase wetland carbon storage, as hippo activity prevents overgrowth of certain plants while promoting peat formation and water circulation. Hippo dung fertilizes aquatic life, supporting fish populations that in turn sustain birds and humans. In a continent where freshwater biodiversity is in steep decline, India alone has lost more than 80% of its riverine species since the 1950s. Reintroducing a keystone species like the hippo could help revive entire food webs. Their wallowing pools and channels would also serve as drought refugees for fish, turtles and amphibians during dry seasons. Hippos also serve as ambassadors for wetland conservation. Just as the tiger inspired India's forest protection laws, hippos could become symbols for protecting Asia's neglected wetlands. Ecosystems that store vast amounts of carbon and provide clean water to hundreds of millions. With climate change intensifying monsoon variability, restoring hippos could help stabilize riverine ecosystems, maintaining floodplain diversity and natural water management. Rewilding hippos in Asia would not be simple. These animals are territorial, require large quantities of vegetation and water, and can be dangerous to humans if not managed carefully. Therefore, any plan must begin with pilot rewilding projects in enclosed or semi-wild reserves where ecological impact can be monitored safely. Lessons could be drawn from Africa's conservation areas and from unconventional examples like Colombia's Magdalena River, where escaped hippos from a private zoo have now formed a thriving wild population. While that case raised issues of overpopulation, it also proved that hippos can adapt successfully to non-native environments and create productive aquatic ecosystems if balanced with careful management. Another challenge is genetic and climatic adaptation. African hippos evolved under different temperature and rainfall patterns, though India's monsoon, climate and tropical rivers could support them well. If introduced gradually, beginning with small populations in protected zones, they could form stable herds that mimic ancient ecological dynamics. Rewilding hippos in India and Asia would not merely bring back a lost species, it would revive an ancient relationship between humans, water and wildlife. It would reconnect Asia's landscapes with their deep evolutionary past, when elephants, rhinos, crocodiles and hippos shared the same floodplains. With the right safeguards, community involvement and international cooperation, the return of hippos could transform degraded rivers into thriving ecosystems once again. Imagine the sight of hippos grazing at dusk along the Brahmaputra, egrets perched on their backs, fish swirling around their submerged bodies, and the calls of distant cranes echoing through the wetlands. That vision isn't fantasy, it's restoration. It's a glimpse of what Asia's rivers once were, and what they could be again if we dare to bring the giants home. Rewilding hippos in Asia would mean more than simply placing them back into wetlands. It would require recreating the ancient river systems that once sustained them. To succeed, we must identify areas that provide ample water, vegetation, stable ecosystems, and low human density, while also offering the potential for community-led conservation and tourism-based coexistence. Below are the most suitable regions across India and the wider Asian continent, each with unique ecological, climatic and cultural advantages for restoring the lost giants of the rivers. The Brahmaputra floodplains are perhaps the best potential rewilding site for hippos in Asia. This vast region, shaped by monsoon floods, oxbow lakes and sediment-rich channels, resembles the African ecosystems where hippos thrive today. The river's wide channels and deep backwaters could easily sustain herds of hippos year-round. Kaziranga National Park, famous for its rhinos, elephants and tigers, already has the biodiversity structure and prey-predator balance needed to accommodate large, semi-aquatic herbivores. Hippos could graze in the park's floodplains and rest in the deep pools of the Brahmaputra's side channels. Their presence would enrich the park's aquatic systems, recycle nutrients and open new feeding areas for fish and birds. Other suitable extensions include the Majuli wetlands and Dibru Saikowar National Park, which experience heavy seasonal flooding and host water buffalo, swamp deer and migratory birds. Hippos here could become a keystone species, creating a dynamic wetland mosaic reminiscent of the lost Pleistocene landscapes of India. The Sundarbans, the world's largest mangrove forest, are an extraordinary candidate for rewilding semi-aquatic species. Though dominated today by Bengal tigers and crocodiles, this landscape once supported a range of large herbivores that moved between tidal rivers and mangrove lagoons. Hippos could be introduced into the upper and freshwater zones of the delta, far from the saline tidal estuaries. In these zones, their grazing would control vegetation density, prevent silt buildup, and increase biodiversity in fish nurseries. Their presence would also strengthen the ecosystem's resilience against floods and cyclones by maintaining open channels and wetlands that buffer storm surges. With proper zoning and community involvement, the Ganges Delta could host one of the world's most iconic freshwater restoration projects. Central India's Narmada and Godavari basins are historically significant because prehistoric Indian hippos once thrived here. Fossils of Hippopotamus paleindicus have been found along these very rivers, proving that conditions were once ideal for their survival. The Narmada Valley, with its wide riverbeds, oxbow wetlands and protected forested stretches could be a modern rewilding site for small pilot herds. The Godavari Basin, extending through Maharashtra, Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, also offers vast stretches of riverine grasslands and wetlands, especially near Karinga Wildlife Sanctuary and Papikonda National Park. Reintroducing hippos in such regions would help restore the lost wetland ecology of peninsular India, improving water quality and supporting fish-based livelihoods for local communities. The Chambal River is one of India's cleanest and most pristine freshwater systems, famous for gharials and river dolphins. Though human settlements are sparse here, the riverbanks remain wide and vegetated, forming an ideal pilot rewilding zone. A carefully managed introduction of hippos in controlled sections could test how they interact with existing aquatic fauna like crocodiles and turtles. The Yamuna floodplains, once part of a vast wetland complex, have been heavily degraded by pollution and urbanization, but small stretches in Uttar Pradesh and Haryana are undergoing ecological restoration. Introducing hippos in future restored areas could help prevent reed overgrowth and maintain open water flow in floodplains where water buffalo and migratory birds coexist. Beyond India, the Mekong River Basin offers perhaps the most suitable ecological conditions for hippo rewilding in all of Asia. The Tonle Sap Lake in Cambodia is an immense seasonal wetland that expands fivefold during monsoon season, supporting one of the richest inland fisheries on Earth. Hippos here could act as nutrient recyclers, enhancing fish productivity and maintaining the delicate balance of aquatic plants. Parts of southern Laos and northern Thailand, with forested floodplains and low human density, could also sustain small hippo populations. Pygmy hippos in particular would suit Southeast Asian swamp forests, where they could help clear invasive vegetation, fertilize wetlands and support wading bird populations. Sri Lanka's Mahaweli River system, Wilpattu wetlands and Minaria floodplains once hosted large aquatic herbivores and could potentially sustain small populations of pygmy hippos. The country's warm, humid climate and extensive irrigation reservoirs resemble conditions in West African forests, where pygmy hippos live today. In combination with elephants and water buffalo, they could enrich Sri Lanka's already biodiverse ecosystems. Historically, the Indus River Basin in Pakistan and Western India was also home to prehistoric hippos. The lower Indus Delta, with its slow channels and oxbow lakes, could host rewilding efforts focused on restoring wetlands alongside fish and bird populations. Similarly, parts of southern Iran's Hele and Shadigan marshes have the right temperature and hydrology for future hippo rewilding, provided water security and protection from hunting can be ensured. If planned with care, hippos could once again roam Asia's rivers, from the Brahmaputra to the Mekong, linking ecosystems across nations. Their return would mean more than reintroducing a species, it would restore ancient ecological rhythms. Together, these regions could form a Pan-Asian wetland corridor, reviving the ecological legacy of the lost hippopotamus Paleindicus and re-establishing hippos as living architects of rivers once again. Rewilding hippos into Asia would reintroduce a powerful ecosystem engineer into landscapes already rich with large herbivores. India and Southeast Asia's floodplains are home to deer, wild boar, antelopes, wild water buffalo, feral cattle, gaur, elephants and Indian rhinos, each occupying overlapping yet distinct niches. The return of hippos would not create competition alone. It would create synergy, restoring the natural balance that existed when these animals coexisted in ancient river ecosystems. Deer species such as the Barasingha, swamp deer, chital, spotted deer, and sambar are grazers and browsers that frequent the edges of wetlands and riverbanks, exactly where hippos thrive. However, their diets differ significantly. Deer primarily consume softer grasses, shoots and leaves, while hippos specialize in coarse, tall, aquatic and riverine vegetation that most other herbivores avoid. By grazing heavily on these dense grasses, hippos would open up feeding grounds for deer, preventing overgrowth and maintaining clear patches where new grass can sprout. Their daily movement between water and land would create shallow trails and mud clearings that deer often use for foraging and wallowing. Moreover, hippos' dung enriches the soil and stimulates plant regrowth, indirectly supporting the plant species that sustain deer populations. During dry seasons, hippo pools would retain water longer, becoming essential refuges for deer and other wildlife. In short, hippos and deer would form a mutually beneficial relationship, hippos maintaining habitat structure and deer taking advantage of the new grazing areas and fertile regrowth that follow. Wild boars are omnivorous opportunists, thriving in muddy and waterlogged environments similar to those of hippos. The two species would likely interact frequently around riverbanks, oxbow lakes, and wallows. Boars could benefit from hippo-created wallows and feeding zones, using them to find roots, tubers, and insects exposed by the hippo's heavy movements. However, there could be occasional competition for mud wallows during the dry season when water is scarce. Despite this, hippos' sheer size and dominance mean direct conflict would be rare. Wild boars would simply avoid them when necessary. In a healthy system with abundant wetlands, both species would coexist easily, with hippos enhancing the boars' foraging opportunities and boars contributing to seed dispersal and soil turnover around the same wetland margins. Asian antelopes such as the blackbuck, nilgai, and four-horned antelope prefer drier grasslands adjacent to riverine zones. While they might not share the same immediate habitats as hippos, the presence of hippos upstream would benefit the entire landscape by keeping rivers open and fertile. Their nutrient recycling enriches floodplain soils far beyond the water's edge, increasing grass productivity and supporting herds of antelopes in surrounding savannas. During monsoon seasons, as rivers expand, hippos grazing and trampling would prevent shrub encroachment, maintaining open plains, a vital condition for fast-running antelopes like blackbuck. In a rewilded system, antelopes would indirectly depend on hippos for habitat maintenance, forming a landscape-level interaction that mirrors the ecological relationships seen in African savannas between hippos and gazelles. Perhaps the most interesting and ancient interaction would be between hippos and wild water buffalo, Bubulus arne. Both are large, semi-aquatic grazers, yet their ecological roles are complementary rather than overlapping. Water buffalo prefer shallow water and graze on soft grasses, while hippos feed mainly on land vegetation during the night and spend the day submerged in deeper pools. In the Brahmaputra and Ganges floodplains, these two giants could form a mutualistic relationship. Hippos maintaining deep water channels and buffalo grazing the shallows. Their combined presence would increase the diversity of aquatic habitats, from open pools to reed-covered marshes, benefiting fish, amphibians and birds. Furthermore, both species' dung would contribute nutrients differently. Buffalo manure enriches the soil on land, while hippo dung nourishes aquatic life. The sight of hippos and wild buffalo sharing the same rivers would recreate the Pleistocene landscape of India, a living echo of the ancient coexistence of multiple mega-herbivores. Feral and wild cattle, such as banteng and free-ranging domestic cattle, are grazers that rely on dry-season grasses and open meadows near rivers. Their coexistence with hippos would largely be positive, as hippos' movement and wallowing help maintain open pastures and waterholes where cattle come to drink. However, in agricultural zones, competition could occur if cattle graze too close to hippo pools. In rewilding areas, it would be essential to create buffer zones separating livestock from hippo territories to avoid disease transmission and conflict. In protected reserves, though, the natural interaction between hippos and wild cattle would resemble Africa's coexistence of hippos with buffalo and cattle-like antelopes, producing a healthy mosaic of grazed and regrown vegetation across the floodplain. The gaur, one of the world's largest bovines, prefers forest edges, bamboo thickets, and grasslands near water. While they are not semi-aquatic like hippos, their dependence on water for drinking and wallowing would lead to occasional interaction. Gaur herds would benefit from hippo activity that maintains open, muddy drinking areas and keeps aquatic vegetation in check. Hippos, in turn, would indirectly benefit from gaur by feeding on regrowth after gaur herds graze tall grasses. Their combined activity would create a dynamic grazing rotation system, maintaining vegetation diversity and preventing either species from monopolizing resources. Such interactions would mirror the ancient coexistence between African hippos and large bovines, such as Cape buffalo. The Asian elephant is another ecosystem engineer and would coexist harmoniously with hippos in large, complex landscapes. Elephants feed on woody plants and trees, while hippos target aquatic and riparian grasses. Together, they maintain a balance between forest and wetland. Elephants often dig waterholes that retain water during dry months, which hippos could use as refuges. In turn, hippos' trampling of riverbanks keeps grasses fresh, attracting elephants that feed on the regrowth. In regions like Kaziranga or the Brahmaputra floodplain, the combined presence of elephants and hippos would create a powerful synergy. Elephants shaping forests from above, hippos sculpting wetlands from below. These interactions would enhance biodiversity dramatically, supporting countless bird and fish species and strengthening ecosystem resilience against floods and droughts. The greater one-horned rhinoceros is the hippo's closest ecological counterpart in India today. Both species are semi-aquatic grazers that inhabit riverine grasslands. However, their feeding behavior and microhabitat preferences differ. Rhinos graze on tall elephant grass and browse on aquatic vegetation, but tend to avoid deeper water, whereas hippos live mostly submerged and emerge at night to feed. Their coexistence would recreate the Pleistocene wetland guild of mixed mega-herbivores. Hippos would open waterways through dense vegetation, allowing rhinos easier access to graze and drink. In return, rhinos would shape the terrestrial side of the wetland, feeding on vegetation hippos cannot reach. The result would be a two-tiered system of wetland management, hippos maintaining aquatic diversity and rhinos maintaining terrestrial balance. Such interaction could make regions like Kaziranga, Orang, or Pobitora National Parks some of the most ecologically complete floodplain systems in the world, with elephants, rhinos, buffalo, and hippos forming the same mosaic of life that once existed in prehistoric India. Rewilding hippos into India and Asia would reconnect the living tapestry of megafauna that once defined the continent's rivers. They would not simply coexist, but collaborate through ecological processes. Hippos shaping waterways, elephants and rhinos sculpting vegetation, deer and antelopes grazing the regrowth, and buffalo maintaining balance between land and water. In this restored harmony, every species would play its role, from fish nourished by hippo dung to migratory birds nesting in the pools hippos create. Such rewilding would bring Asia's rivers closer to their ancient vitality, reviving the forgotten dance of life between land and water that has been silent for 10,000 years. Reintroducing hippos into India and Asia would do far more than restore a single missing herbivore. It would awaken an entire network of life that depends on the balance between land and water. Hippos influence everything around them, from monkeys in the trees above to fish and dolphins beneath the surface. Their daily routines, grazing, wallowing, excreting, and moving between habitats, create ripples of life that flow through ecosystems. At first glance, monkeys and hippos may seem worlds apart. One arboreal, the other aquatic. Yet they share deep ecological ties through the riverside forests that sustain them both. Monkeys such as langurs, macaques, and gibbons depend on fruiting trees that grow along nutrient-rich floodplains. When hippos return, their dung and movement across the landscape would fertilize riverbanks, increasing soil nitrogen and supporting fruit-bearing trees and vines. In Africa, monkeys are often seen perching on trees above hippo pools, dropping seeds and leaves into the water. A similar scene could reappear in Asia, where hippos grazing keeps vegetation open, allowing light to reach the understory. This, in turn, would improve feeding and movement corridors for primates along the river edges. During dry seasons, monkeys might descend to drink from pools maintained by hippos wallowing. Hippos and monkeys, though rarely in direct contact, would collaborate invisibly, one maintaining the fertility of the soil, the other dispersing seeds that grow into the very forest hippos depend on for shade. It is a subtle but powerful symbiosis between the water's strength and the canopy's life. The smooth-coated otter, native to India and Southeast Asia, is one of the most playful and intelligent aquatic mammals on the continent. Otters and hippos would likely coexist peacefully, even beneficially, within the same river systems. Hippos' movement through water stirs up mud, algae, and small invertebrates, which in turn attract fish and crustaceans, the otter's primary food source. Otters could follow hippos as they move, hunting in the nutrient-rich wake the hippos leave behind. In Africa, smaller fish and crustaceans often congregate around hippos to feed on organic matter, and the same pattern would occur in Asia. Otters would benefit from these localized feeding zones, improving their hunting efficiency. Additionally, hippo dung adds nutrients that increase fish biomass, ensuring a healthy food web for otters. Because otters are territorial and family-oriented, they may even use abandoned hippo channels or wallows as den entrances or protected water corridors. The two species would become co-architects of the river ecosystem, one engineering habitat and the other keeping it vibrant through predation. The Ganges River dolphin, Platanista gangetica, and the Irrawaddy dolphin, Orcaella brevirostris, are Asia's great freshwater cetaceans. Both rely on clean, oxygen-rich rivers with strong fish populations, conditions that hippos naturally create. Though it may seem counterintuitive, hippos' constant stirring of river sediments actually increases nutrient cycling and promotes plankton growth, which fuels the entire aquatic food chain. Hippos would not directly interact with dolphins, but would reshape their environment in positive ways. Their dung would fertilize algae and phytoplankton, feeding small fish that become prey for dolphins. The hippo's trampling and channel-clearing behavior would keep shallow backwaters open, ensuring that water continues to circulate even during low-flow seasons, preventing the isolation of dolphin feeding grounds. Moreover, in areas where invasive vegetation threatens to choke waterways, hippos could help maintain open channels, allowing dolphins to navigate freely. In this way, hippos would act as silent allies of the river dolphins, helping to sustain the hydrological diversity and productivity that these endangered mammals desperately need. Among all aquatic species, fish benefit most directly from the presence of hippos. Each hippo contributes immense quantities of organic material to the water daily, a mix of digested plant matter and nutrients that feed plankton and algae. These microscopic organisms form the foundation of the aquatic food web, supporting invertebrates and small fish, which in turn support larger predators and humans alike. In African ecosystems, rivers with hippos host up to twice as much fish biomass as those without them. A similar transformation could occur in Asia. In regions like the Brahmaputra, Godavari or Mekong, rewilded hippos would increase water productivity, making rivers more resilient and biologically active. During the dry season, hippos' deep wallows would serve as fish nurseries, retaining water when other channels dry up. These pools would become hotspots of biodiversity, providing refuge for fry and amphibians alike. Fishermen, too, would ultimately benefit, not through exploitation of hippos, but through the regeneration of fish stocks created by their ecological engineering. Bird life would explode in diversity and abundance in any landscape shared with hippos. In Africa, species such as egrets, herons, jacanas and oxpeckers depend on hippos for food and habitat. In Asia, similar relationships could form with storks, ibises, kingfishers and open-billed birds. As hippos graze and wallow, they expose aquatic insects, frogs and small fish, which become easy prey for wading birds. Their dung attracts insect swarms, feeding entire communities of flycatchers and bee-eaters. Hippos' open pools provide safe breeding grounds for ducks, cormorants and cranes, while the mudbanks they create are ideal nesting sites for ground-nesting birds. The return of hippos would also boost migratory bird populations. Wetlands like Kaziranga or the Tonle Sap would see renewed productivity, with hippos ensuring the constant renewal of shallow water habitats that attract birds from Siberia, Mongolia and Central Asia. In this sense, rewilded hippos would not only restore local ecosystems, but also strengthen Asia's place in the global migratory network of waterfowl. Small mammals, including rodents, civets, mongooses, hares and shrews, would thrive in the dynamic mosaic created by hippo activity. When hippos graze on tall grasses, they create open patches where sunlight reaches the soil, allowing wildflowers, herbs and smaller shrubs to grow. These attract insects and seeds, supporting populations of small mammals that feed on them. Hippo wallows also generate microhabitats for amphibians and reptiles, which small carnivores like mongooses and civets depend on. In forests or grasslands bordering wetlands, rodents and lagomorphs would use dried hippo trails as travel corridors, while carnivorous small mammals hunt around these high-traffic zones. Hippos indirectly stabilize the food web for these creatures by regulating plant density, controlling fire risk through constant grazing and moistening of vegetation. and maintaining perennial water sources that sustain small mammals through dry seasons. In short, the return of hippos would recreate the fine-grained complexity of floodplain life that smaller species depend on but cannot build alone. Rewilded hippos would reconnect Asia's fragmented ecosystems into a living network that breathes, moves, and regenerates. They would feed the rivers that feed the fish, stir the waters that nurture dolphins, open clearings for birds, enrich soils for trees that shelter monkeys, and sustain the wet mud that small mammals call home. Every sound, from a monkey's call to a dolphin's click, would once again echo within an ecosystem shaped by the rhythm of hippos moving between land and water. Their return would not just mean more biodiversity, it would mean the return of balance, a reminder that the health of rivers, forests and skies depends on the great unseen work of creatures like the hippo. Rewilding them in India and Asia would bring back not only a species but an ancient harmony between all forms of life. A symphony once silenced, now waiting to play again. Rewilding hippos into Asia would not only restore herbivore dynamics, it would reshape predator-prey and scavenger relationships across entire floodplain ecosystems. Carnivores and omnivores rely on the web of life that megafauna create. Hippos open rivers, feed scavengers, and enrich the soil and water that sustain prey species. In the presence of hippos, the behaviors and distribution of wolves, dholes, jackals and bears would shift toward more complex, balanced and natural patterns. The Indian wolf inhabits semi-arid plains and grasslands, but also ventures near riverine zones where prey is abundant. In a rewilded system, wolves would benefit indirectly from hippos rather than interact with them directly. Hippos' presence along rivers would increase ungulate populations, deer, antelope, wild boar, providing wolves with more consistent prey. In drought seasons, when prey gather near hippo-created waterholes, wolves would naturally follow. These wetlands, sustained by hippos' constant movement and wallowing, would serve as oases for prey, concentrating food sources for wolf packs. Wolves might scavenge hippo carcasses, particularly those of calves or old adults that die near water, providing valuable protein in lean times. Though wolves would never dare to hunt healthy hippos, the carcass recycling dynamic would enrich local scavenger guilds and feed entire wolf families. The result? Hippos stabilize food resources in wolf territories, allowing wolf populations to remain healthy without overhunting smaller prey. The dhole is Asia's most social and cooperative predator, often hunting in riverine forests and hilly terrain. In a landscape where hippos thrive, dholes would find rich opportunities to hunt and scavenge. Like wolves, dholes would benefit from the prey concentration effect created by hippo-rich wetlands. Dholes rely on species like chital, sambar and wild boar, all of which flourish when floodplains are fertile. Hippos' fertilization of aquatic and riparian vegetation would expand grasslands, boosting deer numbers and creating ideal hunting grounds for dholes. Additionally, dholes are known to scavenge occasionally. A dead hippo could sustain an entire pack for days, drawing other scavengers into complex feeding hierarchies. In terms of behavior, dholes would likely avoid close contact with live hippos, as hippos can be highly territorial and aggressive near water. Yet their coexistence would echo the ancient Pleistocene harmony between large grazers and pack-hunting carnivores, both vital components of functioning food webs. Feral and free-ranging dogs already inhabit much of rural India and Asia, often overlapping with natural reserves. In rewilding areas, managing feral dogs would be essential to protect native wildlife. Yet, interestingly, hippos could help indirectly control dog activity. Because hippos dominate river zones and can be aggressive toward intruding animals, feral dogs would avoid riverbanks and wetland interiors, reducing predation pressure on birds, small mammals, and amphibians. Additionally, hippos' tendency to open up water channels and trample dense vegetation would make ambushes by feral dogs more difficult, thus giving native species a survival advantage. However, hippo carcasses could attract feral dog packs, so strong ecological management, scavenger monitoring, vaccination and population control would be crucial. In healthy, balanced systems, hippos favor native scavengers like jackals and vultures, while discouraging invasive or human-dependent ones such as feral dogs, helping rewilded landscapes regain their natural order. The golden jackal, Canis aurus, is a quintessential opportunist, thriving in river valleys, floodplains and grasslands across India and Southeast Asia, exactly the environments where hippos would return. The two species would likely form a mutually beneficial scavenger dynamic. Jackals would often follow hippos, feeding on fish, frogs, or carcass scraps left behind on the banks. In Africa, similar interactions occur between hippos and jackals, where jackals benefit from hippo kills or dung-feeding insects. In Asia, golden jackals could play a similar role, scavenging hippo dung-associated fauna and even feeding on small animals attracted to hippo pools. Hippos' night-feeding habits would leave grazed areas rich in insects, small reptiles and rodents, easy hunting grounds for jackals at dawn. Meanwhile, jackals' alarm calls could alert hippos and other animals to danger, such as human presence or predators, creating a subtle communication link between species. This natural cooperation would enhance the web of floodplain life, keeping scavenger populations stable and self-regulated. Fox species such as the Bengal fox, Vulpes bengalensis, or red fox, Vulpes montana, would interact indirectly with hippos in dry grasslands and semi-arid river fringes. Hippo-created floodplains would support richer rodent and insect populations, benefiting foxes as small prey become more abundant. Foxes might frequent the edges of hippo pools to hunt frogs, crabs and insects stirred up by hippo movement. Their presence would add a layer of ecological diversity, occupying the smaller scavenger and mesopredator niche. In periods of drought, hippo pools would act as biodiversity islands, attracting foxes from kilometers away. In this way, hippos would indirectly support fox survival by maintaining year-round water and prey availability, making them silent architects of the smaller carnivore food web. The sloth bear, Melosus ursinus, is a powerful omnivore that feeds on termites, honey, fruits and carrion. Although primarily terrestrial, sloth bears rely heavily on forest wetlands and riverine belts for food during fruiting seasons. In a hippo-restored ecosystem, these bears would find far richer feeding grounds. Hippos' grazing would promote fruit-bearing shrubs and termite mounds in cleared areas, increasing food availability for bears. Moreover, sloth bears often scavenge large carcasses, and a hippo carcass would provide an immense food source, attracting bears from great distances. While hippos would pose a threat if approached directly, sloth bears are intelligent and cautious, likely scavenging after hippos have left. Both species would play complementary ecological roles, hippos enriching soils and water systems, and bears recycling nutrients through scavenging and seed dispersal. In floodplain forests of central India or the Brahmaputra Valley, Their coexistence could restore the ancient balance of grazers, omnivores and scavengers that once defined the Indian subcontinent's wild heart. The Asian black bear, Ursus thibetanus, occupies forested mountains and foothill rivers across northeastern India, Myanmar and Southeast Asia. Where hippos rewild lower floodplains, black bears would occupy higher ground. Yet their ecological connection would be strong. Black bears feed on fruits, nuts, fish and small vertebrates. They also scavenge large carcasses when available. Hippos would increase the productivity of lowland floodplains, leading to greater fruiting in riparian forests, a key seasonal food for bears. When hippos die naturally, their carcasses would offer rich nutrition for bears, supporting them through lean seasons. Additionally, hippo-engineered wetlands would attract bees and other insects, indirectly providing more opportunities for bears to feed on honeycombs. Thus, while black bears and hippos may never meet face to face, their ecological relationship would be nutrient-driven and mutually beneficial, linking the aquatic and forested realms into a continuous life support system. The return of hippos to India and Asia would mark the rebirth of an ancient ecological partnership. Not a predator-prey dynamic, but a web of nourishment and equilibrium. Wolves, dholes and jackals would thrive on the abundance hippos create. Bears would feast on the fruits and carcasses that follow. Foxes and small scavengers would fill in the spaces in between. By recycling nutrients and maintaining fertile floodplains, hippos would indirectly stabilize predator populations, reducing conflict and ensuring sustainable prey abundance. Their very presence would anchor the natural order. Grazers feeding the land, predators maintaining balance, scavengers closing the circle. In a rewilded Asia where elephants roam forests, rhinos graze the grasslands, and hippos breathe beneath the rivers, every howl, growl and splash would once again belong to a complete, thriving world, the living chorus of an ecosystem healed. When hippos return to India and Asia, they will not exist in isolation. Their reintroduction would echo an ancient balance that once linked rivers, forests and plains through an intricate web of life. These massive grazers would shape ecosystems that feed and protect predators, from stealthy small cats to powerful tigers, and even influence reptiles like crocodiles and snakes that share their watery world. Small wild cats such as the fishing cat, jungle cat, leopard cat and rusty-spotted cat would find abundant benefits from a hippo-restored wetland system. The fishing cat in particular would thrive. Hippo dung fertilizes aquatic ecosystems, increasing fish populations and creating shallow pools where small cats can hunt easily. Hippo's movement between land and water opens reed beds and dense grass that often block smaller predators' access to water. These clearings would form prime hunting zones for fishing cats and jungle cats, which depend on visibility and access to prey. Leopard cats, living in more forested wetlands, would hunt rodents that flourish on hippo-enriched floodplains. By reshaping wetlands into complex mosaics of grass, mud and water, hippos would indirectly boost small cat populations, providing them both prey and protective cover. The clouded leopard, a secretive and tree-dwelling predator of Southeast Asia and northeastern India, depends on dense, fruit-rich forests near rivers. Hippos would enhance its environment by maintaining productive river corridors where fruit trees thrive. As hippos recycle nutrients through dung and open up clearings, They encourage forest regeneration, a process that attracts herbivores like macaques and deer, key prey for clouded leopards. In a rewilded ecosystem such as the Brahmaputra floodplain or the forests of Arunachal Pradesh, clouded leopards would indirectly benefit from increased prey abundance and forest edge diversity. They would likely avoid direct encounters with hippos, but would thrive on the ecological vitality that hippos create. If African cheetahs continue to expand in India as part of the Kuno and Nauradehi rewilding projects, their future range could overlap with semi-arid or savanna-like floodplains where hippos might also be introduced. The two species would not directly interact. Hippos occupy riverine habitats, while cheetahs prefer dry grasslands. However, hippos' role in maintaining open grassland edges along rivers could benefit cheetahs indirectly. When hippos graze on tall river grasses, they create corridors where antelopes and gazelles feed, the very prey cheetahs hunt. In dry seasons, hippo pools could also serve as watering sites for cheetahs and their prey, indirectly improving survival rates for both. Thus, while cheetahs and hippos would rarely meet face-to-face, their coexistence would mirror Africa's balance between riverine grazers and open-land predators, forming a natural continuum of ecosystems from wetland to grassland. The snow leopard, living high in the Himalayas, would never encounter hippos directly. Yet their relationship would still exist across ecological gradients. Hippos in the foothill rivers of Nepal, Bhutan and northern India would nourish the lower altitude ecosystems that feed into alpine regions. Rivers originating from hippo-fertilized floodplains carry nutrients upward, strengthening vegetation and prey populations in mountain valleys. This invisible connection forms a vertical ecosystem chain. Hippos enriching the lowlands, which in turn sustain prey and vegetation for the snow leopard's highland territories. In a rewilded subcontinental system, every predator, from the plains to the peaks, would be connected through these ancient life-supporting flows. The Indian leopard, Panthera pardus fusca, is perhaps the most adaptable of all big cats and would often share the same floodplain zones as hippos. Leopards are opportunistic hunters and scavengers. They might occasionally feed on hippo calves or carcasses, particularly during droughts when riverbanks dry up. However, the main benefit for leopards would be increased prey abundance. Hippos' presence leads to denser populations of deer, wild boar and small mammals, which form the leopard's main diet. Leopards would also exploit hippo paths and open areas for ambush, using fallen trees or grass clearings created by hippograzing. Like in Africa, where leopards patrol near hippo pools, these cats in India's Brahmaputra or Godavari valleys would coexist peacefully, occasionally scavenging but mostly benefiting from the ecological wealth hippos generate. The Asiatic lion of Gujarat's Gir forest represents a remnant of the once vast lion range that stretched from Europe to India. If lions were ever reintroduced into central or eastern India, their interaction with hippos would be symbolic of a restored Pleistocene balance. Lions, being social hunters, rarely venture into deep water, but they do hunt near rivers where prey gathers. Hippos would attract herds of antelope, buffalo and deer to riverbanks, effectively drawing prey into lion territory. Lions would not attack hippos unless desperate, as adult hippos are formidable. Still, lions might target weak or young individuals caught too far from water. Overall, hippos would indirectly support lion populations by creating predictable prey concentrations, sustaining large carnivores in ecosystems capable of supporting both terrestrial and semi-aquatic megafauna. The tiger, Panthera tigris, is the supreme predator of Asia's wetlands and forests. In rewilded river systems such as Kaziranga, the Sundarbans or the Godavari Delta, tigers and hippos could share overlapping territories. Tigers occasionally prey on large herbivores like buffalo and boar, but hippos would likely be too dangerous to attack directly except in rare circumstances, such sick or stranded individuals. The relationship between the two would be one of mutual habitat enhancement. Hippos maintain open waterways that tigers use for ambush, while tigers control ungulate numbers on land, preventing overgrazing of the vegetation hippos feed upon. Their coexistence would stabilize wetland food webs and recreate the primeval symbiosis between predator and engineer, the tiger shaping balance from above, the hippo shaping life from below. In flooded forests, such as the Sundarbans, hippos could also expand the wetland zone's productivity, indirectly sustaining the prey base of Bengal tigers. The visual of tigers stalking along a hippo-filled river would embody the restored majesty of Asia's Pleistocene landscapes. The striped hyena, hyena, is primarily a scavenger and would benefit immensely from the presence of hippos. Hippos' large carcasses, whether from natural death or predation by big cats, would provide rare, nutrient-rich food sources for hyenas, supporting their population across semi-arid and floodplain regions. Hyenas could follow hippo paths along rivers, scavenging on smaller animal remains and hunting rodents or birds disturbed by hippos' nightly movements. Hippo dung also attracts insects, creating foraging zones for hyenas and other nocturnal scavengers. In this relationship, the hippo would act as a keystone provider, nourishing entire scavenger communities. The spotted hyena, potentially reintroduced as part of future Pleistocene restoration projects, would have a far more complex interaction with hippos. In Africa, spotted hyenas occasionally scavenge hippo carcasses or even attempt to harass weakened individuals, but never attack healthy ones. In India, reintroduced spotted hyenas would likely serve as major scavengers of hippocarrion and riverbank kills, fulfilling the role once held by the extinct cave hyena, Crocuta spelaea. This would restore an ancient nutrient recycling system lost since the Ice Age, where large carnivores and scavengers cleaned the plains of decay and redistributed nutrients. Their coexistence would also regulate disease, as scavengers quickly dispose of carcasses that could otherwise pollute the water. Spotted hyenas, with their bone-crushing power, would complement the hippo's ecosystem engineering with cleanup efficiency, forming a powerful restoration pair for future Asia. The mugger crocodile, Crocodilus palustris, and saltwater crocodile, Crocodilus porosus, already dominate Asian rivers and would share a cautious coexistence with hippos. In Africa, crocodiles and hippos occupy the same waters but rarely fight unless provoked. Hippos' size deters crocodiles from attacking adults, while crocodiles occasionally prey on very young hippo calves. In a balanced ecosystem, the two species would establish territorial respect. Hippos control deeper pools by day, crocodiles hunt fish and smaller prey nearby. Their combined presence would reinforce the natural hierarchy of rivers, restoring the full spectrum of aquatic megafauna. Crocodiles would benefit from the abundance of fish and carrion generated by hippo activity, while hippos would help keep river channels deep and oxygenated. The occasional dominance displays, roaring, splashing, snapping, would echo ancient scenes of coexistence that once defined Asian wetlands. The gharial, Gavialis gangeticus, a specialized fish eater, would benefit even more than crocodiles from hippo rewilding. Hippo dung fertilizes rivers, increasing plankton and thus fish biomass, the gharial's sole food source. Hippo's constant water movement would keep channels open and suitable for gharial nesting. Because gharials are non-aggressive and spend most of their time basking or swimming in deep waters, they would pose no threat to hippos. Instead, hippos' engineering would revive entire gharial habitats, offering a new foundation for the recovery of this critically endangered species in India and Nepal. Asia's reticulated pythons, Burmese pythons and king cobras, are apex reptiles of their ecosystems. While these snakes would avoid adult hippos, they might take advantage of the microhabitats hippos create, burrows, mud banks and reed clearings, which attract small mammals and birds, their main prey. In rare cases, large pythons could prey on very young hippo calves, but such incidents would be exceptional. More importantly, hippos' maintenance of high humidity and stable wetland temperatures would expand habitat availability for snakes, amphibians, and reptiles in general. Through these indirect effects, hippos would increase reptile diversity by stabilizing the hydrology of floodplain ecosystems. Snakes, in turn, would control rodent populations in the nutrient-rich soils along hippo trails, closing another loop in the web of life. The rewilding of hippos would restore more than a species. It would rebuild the ancient architecture of Asia's ecosystems, where predators, scavengers, and aquatic engineers coexisted in perfect tension. Hippos would nourish rivers for gharials, open floodplains for lions and tigers, enrich grasslands for cheetahs and leopards, and feed the scavengers that close the cycle of life. From the stealth of small cats to the patience of crocodiles, every species would find its rhythm in the symphony hippos conduct, the pulse of rivers reborn.
And that brings us to the end of today's journey. The story of hippos in India and Asia is not just about bringing back a lost species. It's about remembering what our rivers once were: wild, free, and full of life. It's about restoring balance to ecosystems that have waited thousands of years for their great engineers to return. Rewilding is never just about the animals. It's about the landscapes, the people, and the connection between them. It's about hope, imagination, and the courage to rebuild what was lost. Maybe one day, the Brahmaputra will once again echo with the grunts of hippos at dusk, and children will grow up in a world where ancient creatures walk the waters of Asia once more. Until then, every river we protect, every wetland we restore, and every story we share brings us one step closer to that vision. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the lost giants of the East, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Rewilding the Future for more stories of wildlife, restoration, and hope. I'll see you in the next episode, where we travel west across the deserts and mountains of the ancient world to explore rewilding the Asiatic lions in West Asia and the Caucasus, a story of survival, return, and the roar that once shook empires.